So the Arman Tsarukyan situation has caused a lot of disarray in the stagnant lightweight division. So a lot of people are making arguments from one side or the other. Arman pulling out is the reason for this, and now we don't have a number one contender to fight Ilia Topuria. But then the other side is saying, no, we do have a number one contender. It is Arman Tsarukyan. But the lightweight's mentality is so different now. What was the premier division of the UFC, full of hungry contenders, everybody wanted to fight each other, but now everyone wants to pick and choose their next opponents, except 3 fighters: Arman Tsarukyan, Max Holloway, and Dan Hooker. Max is now injured and says that he won't fight for the rest of the year, so we'll talk about Arman and Dan Hooker and the rest of the contenders, especially Arman, because he is the fighter that all of this is revolving around. And he is the fighter who is willing to fight any other top contender. But firstly, at the beginning of the year, Arman pulled out with a back injury against Islam Makhachev. But then later, Arman wanted to step up on short notice to fight Justin Gaethje at a catchweight, which was rejected by the UFC due to the 160-pound request, right? It wasn't Gaethje that turned it down. It was the UFC that wanted it at 155 pounds, no catchweight. So he moved on and then successfully weighed in as the backup fighter for the title fight between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira, which arguably it should have been Arman in there against Ilia in the first place. And he weighed in perfectly. He has called out every other top contender to a fight, but everyone has turned him down besides Max Holloway and Dan Hooker, who are absolutely goated for that. Arman called out Ilia, Charles before the Ilia fight, Gaethje, Hooker, and Pimblett, and all of those other fighters said that they want to fight someone else instead, besides Hooker. It was understandable why Charles did, since he was aiming for a title shot that he ultimately got. So this is what Arman said when he called out all of these other top contenders. This is what he said about Ilia when Ilia said that he would rather vacate his belt than fight Arman. Quote, imagine calling yourself a champion, but you're already looking for a way out. You can vacate it or I'll take it. Either way, it's mine. He talked about Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira. Quote, I'm the true number one contender, ready to prove it against anyone. But how am I supposed to do that when everyone else just wants to fight on paper? Charles, Justin, you can sit and wait, or you can step up and earn it. And here he talked about Dan Hooker, as well as another fight that the UFC offered him, which according to him made absolutely no sense. This is what he says, quote, it's the UFC who made me angry when they offered me that kind of an opponent. I would say it was disrespectful to me from their side to offer me that. I deserve better. I am the number one contender. I'm not saying that they should give me a title shot. Just give me a contender fight. If they offer me a top 5 opponent, okay. Somebody on a winning streak at least. The one they offered me is on a losing streak. They could have given me Dan Hooker. The guy has won a few fights in a row, unquote. I wonder who they offered him there. I mean, I would imagine it was probably Rafael Fiziev. It could have been Chandler, but again, that didn't make any sense either. Chandler at the time was like number 8. And I agree with Arman. He should get someone who's in the top 5, or even Dan Hooker who's in the top 6, right? He was willing to fight Dan Hooker. And here he talks about Paddy Pimblett after Paddy talked about him pulling out. Quote, says the guy who got the easiest path to the top in UFC, just because he's got a funny accent and budget Beatles haircut. I dare you to call me out if you win, and we will see who shit his pants in the octagon when we meet clown. So as you can see, Arman has called out every single one of them. But Arman has gotten criticism for not fighting anybody ever since he pulled out against Islam. Not the other fighters who don't want to fight him. He's the one that's gained more criticism. Yeah, he is the one who's calling out all the top contenders to fight him. How can he fight anyone that makes sense when everyone that makes sense doesn't want to fight him? Like, I've seen some arguments, people say that he should fight Dariush and Moicano and fighters at the bottom of the rankings, and it's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's the number one contender. He shouldn't have to fight guys that low in the rankings. Like, it's very different when fighters duck someone who's rising the rankings, right? Like when Shavkat was coming up, a lot of fighters didn't want to fight him. There was little to gain and a lot to lose fighting a rising contender that skilled. That is very different than being established as the number one guy and then nobody wants to fight you. I mean, the current champion, Ilia Topuria, turned him down recently and said that he would vacate his title over fighting Arman. Justin Gaethje turned down everyone other than Ilia, or getting paid a lot more to fight anybody else. And even the number 9 ranked fighter, Paddy Pimblett, said that he wants to fight Gaethje over Arman because no one cares about Arman anymore. And he has reiterated that multiple times, that Arman's not an exciting fight, nobody cares about Arman, he wants to fight Justin Gaethje. It is crazy that the number 9 ranked doesn't care to fight the number 1 contender, and instead is picking the easier fight in Justin Gaethje to get himself a title shot. Gaethje can't grapple with Paddy. Arman can. And frankly, it just seems like everybody is ducking the toughest fight in the division. That is Arman Tsarukyan. Nobody wants to fight this guy, except Hooker and Holloway. Arman Tsarukyan is the number 1 contender of this division, and the number 1 contender should be fighting for the belt. Anything else does not represent the sport. If the best isn't fighting the best, then what are we even doing? Is it a sport at the end of the day, or is it catered more to the entertainment side? Do we go straight WWE with this sport, where theatrical press conferences and trash talk is the reason to make fights? Paddy Pimblett fighting Ilia Topuria right now is all fun until he gets slumped out cold within 2 rounds, and then we all question why he was even in there to begin with. Justin Gaethje has gotten multiple title shots and lost all of them, and he's only coming off 1 win against Rafael Fiziev, who is number 10 in the rankings. He got knocked out cold by Max Holloway in one of the biggest highlights of both his and Max's careers. He was on the receiving end of that. And Gaethje saying like he was doing the UFC a favor. He was treating it like an exhibition fight. Max Holloway certainly wasn't treating that as an exhibition. And now look, he's ranked above Justin Gaethje. And with him beating Dustin, he's essentially destroyed Gaethje's path to a title shot, because now he also has Gaethje's best win to a title fight. They both beat Dustin. What else does Justin have? He lost to Max too. Max beat both Dustin and Justin. How can you give Justin Gaethje a title shot over Max now, even though he lost to Ilia? And that goes to Max as well. Max Holloway has solid lightweight wins against legends, but he already fought Ilia and got KO. Them both moving up a division does create a different dynamic for a rematch, but even that should not trump Arman's title shot. Arman never fought Ilia. He never lost to Ilia. He's on the longest win streak out of any ranked fighter in this division. He's coming off a win against then #1 contender Charles Oliveira, and also has the most interesting fighting style to collide with Ilia's. An explosive top-tier wrestler who rains fire and brimstone on top of his opponents. Ilia has not fought any high-level wrestler like that. Most of his career has been fought against strikers, and perhaps this new style could be a kryptonite for him. He's already fought the best strikers in the world and knocked them out. I don't care to see a lesser one who hasn't earned a shot, like Gaethje, get knocked out by Ilia too. And Paddy, who is just an overall worse version of Oliveira with some distance management skills, get KO'd as well. Ilia Topuria versus Arman Tsarukyan is the fight to make. It's the best versus the best. It is what represents the sport. Anything else loses meaning of that. The only issue is that Dana disagrees with that fight. He believes that Arman should fight someone else, but again, against who? Who is willing to fight Arman? Just Dan Hooker. So although Ilia versus Arman is the fight to make, the only alternative is Arman versus Hooker. And listen, Dan Hooker is awesome and always tries to put on a good fight, but he would get dominated by Arman. And there's not a lot of interest in that fight in general. The fight doesn't make sense unless everyone rejects Arman first. And Dana also doesn't give him a title shot. I get it though that pulling out usually requires another win to earn that shot again, just like it did for Oliveira after he pulled out against Islam, right? He fought Arman, he fought Dariush, he fought Chandler before getting a title shot again. But the difference is there is no one else to fight Ilia. Literally no one else makes sense or has earned a title shot. It's possible that they could just run a few fights between the contenders to see who comes out on top with the best performance and allow Ilia to sit out, watch the show, be the king that is looking down and watching the Coliseum. That kind of structure for fights generally creates a lot of excitement for the next title fight. It would be really interesting. But if they do that, then Ilia would have to sit out in the meantime. And if Ilia is fine with that, considering that he doesn't fight that often, then making the contender fights makes sense. You can have any of them fight each other, honestly, but then again, only Hooker wants to fight Arman. So the fights would be Arman versus Hooker, and then give Gaethje more money to fight Paddy. And that would be the bigger fight of the two, so it would create more incentive to pay Gaethje more to fight Paddy. And then whoever has the best performance out of those two fights gets the next title shot. And seeing all those fights would boost Ilia's ego even more, just sitting there watching his contemporaries go to war for the mere chance of facing against him in the octagon. Ilia would have to feel like the emperor or the king watching these guys fight. And he probably would not turn that down for an ego boost. And that is the Arman situation. Honestly, he should be fighting Ilia. It's the most interesting fight. He has earned the shot more than anybody else. He's the #1 contender, the longest win streak out of any ranked fighter currently, other than Ilia, of course. And he already weighed in successfully when Ilia fought Charles. Let's give Arman Tsarukyan the shot, and the rest of the guys in the meantime can fight each other. Once Gaethje sees that someone else got a title shot, it might incentivize him to fight someone else. And they could guarantee him a title shot if he beats Paddy, for an example, you know? And again, during all of this, Max is injured, so he's not going to be fighting for the rest of the year. Max is most likely going to fight Charles. They both said they want to fight each other, so we could probably have Max versus Charles at the beginning of next year. And there you go. That's my take of Arman Tsarukyan and in the landscape for the lightweight division. I would have Ilia versus Arman, Max versus Charles, Gaethje versus Paddy, Hooker versus Dariush, the rematch between Gamrot and Fiziev, because that fight was unfinished. Moicano versus Chandler is the perfect fight. BSD's fighting Hoofy, and he's going to get absolutely annihilated. And then they could do Grant Dawson versus perhaps Michael Johnson. That'd be an interesting fight. So there you go. The lightweight division is a full pond full of ducks. It's crazy the difference it was during Khabib's reign. Everybody fought each other then, except Tony versus Khabib. You know, they tried that multiple times, but it is what it is. Lightweight division used to be very different, man. All these guys always wanted to fight, and now it's just like the opposite. We have a few guys, Arman, Max, and Hooker. They're willing to fight anybody. That makes sense, of course. You don't want Arman to fight Bobby Green or Michael Johnson. Like, that wouldn't make any sense. And the rest of the top contenders want to pick and choose.